Welcome to the Recovering Preachers Kids podcast. I am super excited that you have taken time out of your day to catch this podcast, and you're not going to be disappointed. As our name says, Lisa and I are recovering preachers kids, but let's just be real. We are all recovering from something. Some of us are recovering from work. Some days you're just recovering from living in the house with your spouse, and help us all, we can be recovering from the day with our kids and our grandkids. Let's just be honest. But the great thing is we serve a God who is merciful and graceful, and he gets us through all of it. But there are times that we go through things in our life that we just need a little hand. We need a little help to get through the recovery. And so I'm going to let Lisa introduce the guest that we have with us today, and go on and get your cup of coffee, get your little snacky snack, and sit down because you're not going to want to miss it. You are listening to the Recovering Preachers Kids podcast with Lisa and Lori.
All right. Today we have Jena Forehand. Jena and I met, oh goodness, I don't even know. I was trying to think how long ago. I don't want to talk about years, right? But how long it's been since we met. But her and Dale came to Camden to do a marriage conference, and we met then, and we became friends. And we don't always see each other, but when we meet up, it's just like picking up right where we left off. So Jena has a wonderful women's ministry. She's written some books, does some teaching, and I've done several of her studies, and she just is a powerful woman in the word and can teach where I can understand. I need kindergarten level, and she teaches that way, and I love to listen to her teach. So we welcome you and thank you for taking this time with us this evening. And part of the reason we invited Jena to be on here with us is we partner with the Deeper House, and we thought, this will be a great opportunity for everybody to put a face with the name, understand what they're supporting. And so when people go to our website and they purchase something, they know what the ministry is and what it's about. So that's where we'll just start right there. Jena, you just start and tell us, how did the Deeper House come about?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank y'all so much for having me, and such an honor, and such a honor because I know y'all and because I love what you're doing. And, we need more people being real, authentic about their faith. And so thank y'all for what you do. So to make the longest story short, Dale and I were married, divorced. God put our family back together. He called us into ministry. We were traveling with Lifeway, doing women's events and men's events. And then I got the opportunity to write a discipleship series for women, because what many people had said to us through the years is, what is missing in women's ministry? And I was like, I just think that women are looking for some kind of pathway to grow deeper in their relationship with the Lord. And then the Lord brought that scripture out of Psalms 42, where it says, we always know, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs for you, right? And we even sing songs about it. But if you go on down, it says, deep calls to deep as the roars of a waterfall. So I always sat in that scripture like, what in the world is that meaning? And just as I just have sat with the Lord about that, it was like, the deep places in my heart are calling to the deep places of your heart. And so out of that came Living Deeper Ministries, that we would learn as Christians how to live at a deeper place. And so I'm teaching this, I'm having small groups, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up to me and says, have you ever thought about doing this in the prisons? And I was like, no. And they're like, well, maybe you ought to go do it in the prisons. And so, it just so happened I got to go do it out in the prisons, and we were at Tutwiler Prison here in Wetumpka, Alabama. And I'm there, and this girl on the front row says, hey, Miss Jena. And I thought, how do you know me? And she was like, and then I thought, oh, she's holding my book. So she's just read I'm the author, And she goes, do you remember me? And I said, I don't. I said, and I'm usually pretty good about faces. I can't remember your name, but I know your face.
Yeah.
And she said, well, do you know these people? And she held up a picture of a couple that lived in our neighborhood, and her husband and the man was a runner. And so we lived up on a hill, and every time he stopped to take a breath, I would wave at him or whatever. And so I thought, that's them, So anyway, long and short of it is, she said, that's my parents. And I was like, what? what are you doing in here? And she said, I got caught up with a man and he introduced me to drugs. And that's why I'm in here. And so, in my mind, y'all, I honestly thought that you get this attitude or this thought mentality of what you're going to see in the prisons, right?
Right.
They look this way, they act this way, and actually the culture of prison has changed. It's really medium to wealthier families because they can afford the drugs. So it used to be more poverty and now it's not. So you walk in there and you're like, these girls look just like me, right? So
Yeah.
I was just at that moment drawn into this and I was like, Lord, if this is something I'm supposed to be a part of, just make a way. And so I was cleaning up one night after a Bible study. And, I'm not one to throw out that I heard God speak. There's some time, God speaks all the time. He speaks through his word, but there are times when you're like, there's no denying that was from the Lord.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
felt like the Lord said to me, what are you going to do when I give you this place? And I said, like this place or like one like it? And I giggled. I felt like Sarah, right? And laughing. And so, anyway, and I was like, Lord, what does that mean? Like this place, one like it, what does that mean? And that was it. And so I just began to pray, Lord, thank you for the building. If I went into the prisons and I asked the lady, and I always prepared, ready what I was going to tell them. And I said, and the Lord said, don't go in there and tell them what you think they need. You ask them what they need. And so I sat down. I was like, hey, tonight I'm not supposed to teach y'all. I'm supposed to listen. And I need to know, what do y'all need? Well, they started crying. Well, you don't cry because that's a sign of weakness when you're in prison. But they started to cry. And I said, wait, what are those tears about? And they said, no one's ever come in here and asked us what we need. And what we need is a godly, Christ-centered, safe place to restore. So, and
Wow.
reconcile with them. And I was like, whoa, never crossed my mind to start a house, never. And so from that moment when God said, what are you going to do when I give you a place? For 8 years, I started going, okay, God, thank you for my building. I don't know where it is. I don't know so much so that my grandson we'd drive by big buildings and he'd go, Lord, thank you for my gilding. And I was like, you don't know what you're saying, but okay, mouth of a child, right?
Right.
And so we're just thanking God. And honestly, I got to be honest with y'all. That it was painful sometimes because people were like, you didn't hear God. It's been 8 years and you still don't have a building. I don't think you heard from God. I had friends who walked away from me and rejected me because they thought I was being foolish. But I was like, you hadn't read the Bible, because some people had to wait 40 years. I've only had to wait 8. But anyway, and so I was excited because 8's the number of new beginnings, right? These ladies need a new beginning, and God opened the door. I'm sitting at the Deeper House right now. So yeah, so God opened the door for me to purchase this building. A lady whose mother passed away loved women's ministry. And she walked up to me and she said, I got a check for you for $55,000 that came from my mother's estate that she wanted to give to women's ministry, and I'm supposed to give it to you. I was blown away. So that enabled us to put our down payment, and now we've got a house. It holds 6 women. There's 4 here currently, and we just picked one up Monday from prison. She was released on parole, and man, just what God is doing here just blows my mind. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but also the most rewarding.
So what do the women what would a day in the life look like, or how do they go from prison, and then how do they come to the Deeper House, and then how long are they there? What's the end goal for them to I don't even want to say recovered. I don't think we're ever all,
Yeah, right.
completely recovered till we get to glory. So,
Yeah.
but what is the plan and how does that work?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that I go into prisons every Tuesday night and do Bible study. And that's where they get to know me and I get to know them. And then out of that, should they say, when I get out, I want to go to this place, a certain place, then they can suggest coming to me. They fill out applications. We do interviews, and really they're interviewing me more than I'm interviewing them. And then I go to their parole hearing. and basically just stand up and say who I am. I'm the executive director, and they've applied and we've accepted them to come. And so that's kind of how, if the parole board agrees to give them parole, then they set a date and I go pick them up, which is so much fun. But, because you're like, you're free. But anyway, let's go have IHOP. That's what they usually want. Pancakes.
Yes,
I don't blame them, right? Anyway, I just get sugar-free syrup because I think that helps in some way. Okay. But anyway, um, and so we go, um, so anyway, once they get here, they agree to 1 year program. We help them get an education. We help them find a job. Our biggest thing is to teach them how to walk with God, to learn how to hear his voice, for him to be the shepherd and them to be a sheep and be led by the Lord. And then we have to really work on what I would use the word reconciliation. You know, the Bible says that Jesus came to reconcile us to God, right? And then
Mhm.
it says he's given us the ministry of reconciliation. So they need to reconcile with God. They've got a lot of things to reconcile, you know, in their lives, from trauma, some pain that we have to walk through. And that's sometimes not fun to revisit
You're
those
right.
places, but so necessary to find that healing. And then there's so many relationships and bridges that they've burned with their family. So then we have to go into, how are we going to reconcile with your parents who you know, took so much money from? Or how are you going to reconcile with your children who feel like you loved drugs more than you loved them? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are kind of the processes we go through. And like I said, you know, it was 8 years. Eight's the number of new beginnings. So we have like 8 things that we don't want them to get perfect in. None of us have arrived, but that we encourage them to get better in, whether it's their walk with the Lord, the way they do their job, the way they do their finances. So many of them have never been taught those kind of things. And so the joy of it is that in so doing, y'all, we get to break some generational things that have been going on in their family line for forever. And they get to step into some new and to change their mindset and their life so that they can then see their children and their grandchildren do the same. I mean, like I said, hardest
Amazing.
thing I've ever done, but the most amazing thing at the same time.
That is amazing.
One of the things that you said that stood out to me, and I thought, can I attend that class, is when you talked about teaching them to hear God's voice and for him to be the shepherd and them to be the sheep. And can I tell you, that is a massive struggle for me even today. I mean, I'm a preacher's kid, but I mean, it's pretty obvious I was the rebellious one. And so I wasn't saved till I was an adult. You know, I mean, I got baptized a whole bunch of times, but I was not saved until I was an adult. And that has been hard for me to learn that today I get it and tomorrow I don't. You know, I think that
Yeah. That's me.
that's
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, one of the first book, I wrote a book, and then it's the first book they go through, and it's actually called Focus. And it's, how do I position or posture myself in such a way that I can hear God more clearly so I can follow him more fully. And so because when you look at the word shepherd, it's a sheep, that part of a herd. So we are sheep, which makes it very personal, right? You know,
Yeah,
it's
right.
God leading me. So it's very personal, but a herd is a whole bunch of us. And I was talking the other day, and, you know, y'all may not even want to bring this up. So I guess you can cut it out if you don't want to talk about it. But given the whole thing with the death of Charlie Kirk, you know, somebody asked me, what do you think that was about? And I said, like, are you talking spiritually? Because there's probably a million ways we could
Yeah.
go. But I said, there's a part of me that believes the enemy wanted to use COVID to isolate us. And then after we kind of got through that, you know, now we've kind of come back into our churches and all those kind of things. But now we've had, you know, this assassination of Charlie Kirk. And my daughter even said, Mama, I was a little afraid to take my daughter to the park today, because I thought, what if some crazy person just decides they want to open up a round of and shoot. We did a vigil in our park for Charlie Kirk, and there's hundreds of people there, and there's 2 policemen. And so you're like, but
That
what
fear.
the enemy would want us to be afraid. So I always say you got to operate in the opposite spirit. So if God said we're a sheep, but we're a part of a herd, then he says unity is so important. I mean, what did Jesus pray in John 17? He could have prayed anything. And he said, I pray that they will be one so the world will know you sent me. So in John 17. So unity is such a big deal. And so when it comes to letting the shepherd lead you, yes, you're a sheep, it's personal, but you've got to also be a part of a herd. And if the enemy's setting us up to isolate us so he can attack us, then we have to operate in the opposite spirit or the opposite thought pattern, and that is unity. So you got to
Good.
find your herd. You know what I'm saying? You got to find that
Yeah.
you got to find that herd, because some days you're in the ditch and you need somebody to get you out. And other days you're in the ditch and you need somebody to get you out. And that encouragement of the scriptures, the accountability is so vital, I think, for us learning how to hear God's voice. Because we all hear him differently. I hear him through the word. Some of my friends hear him in dreams. Some of my other friends will see him on a bumper sticker. And I'm like, I want that. So, I mean, so we all, because he knows us and how we communicate and our personalities. So he meets us where we are. And so we can learn and grasp from so from each other. So, with these girls coming together, that's what I keep saying, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. It's very personal, but you also need to be a part of a herd. And I think when you come together like that in unity, it offers you more opportunity to learn how to distinguish the voice of God. I mean, John 10,
Mhm.
my sheep hear my voice. They know my voice and I know theirs. And so I'm always like, you remember, I mean, this showed my age right here, but like a transistor radio. Do you remember how you had to turn? It's like
Yeah.
until you right
Yes.
where it needs to be. I feel like that's kind of what a herd does. It helps us tune into one another, but tune into the Lord. And I think that's vital. How is he going to lead us if we don't tune into him? You know?
And I guess I needed to hear that today because I'm such a perfectionist. So therefore I like to just be sure I'm by myself. I need to make sure I get it right. And before I can get it right, then I can go and help everybody else or, whatever. And I've never heard it explained. I've always heard that kind of explained. Yeah, he's my shepherd. So it's always the focus on the personal, but hearing it as we're heard and in unity and we need that just kind of just really clicked with me that I need to quit trying to be by myself and do it all by myself and figure it out by myself. And maybe that's, the deeper house with the ladies you're working with. I'm sure they've walked through that some too, as far as I got to be by myself to get through whatever the problem is or the reason they're there and how to get out and to ask for help. And that's probably the hardest thing is to say, I need help. Well, it's the hardest
Yeah.
thing for me to say. I can't,
The
I
hardest
have a
thing,
hard saying.
yeah, is to humble ourselves. We've so many times have such a spirit of pride about us that we don't want to
Yeah.
admit we need other people, but that's how God
Yeah.
created us. We do need other people. He meets all our needs, but we need other people to come alongside of us, and I think that's the beauty of it. That's what we're seeing out of the deeper house. And like even Amy came in Monday and she came in, we had so much going on and everything, and at one point and I opened up, we have a closet right here and it's like a big walk-in closet and we're like, what is this here for? We don't need it. Anyway, and we've turned it into our prayer closet. So there's a Bible and they can kneel down. There's little pillows in there and they can just be by themselves with the Lord. And so she just started crying and she goes, and I said, are you okay? And all the girls surrounded her and hugged her and said, we've been there too. It's just changed. They're used to a certain way of doing things in prison and you learn how to navigate. And now you've come into a brand new place and everybody's loving you and hugging on you and you don't even know what to do with yourself. And so, I've just watched her. There's a place for the herd, but there's a place to be by yourself too. And you're either on one side or the other. Like I do a lot by myself, but I don't have a herd, or I'm always with the herd and I never take time by myself. So asking the Lord, Proverbs 11:1, a just balance is God's delight. Finding the good balance in that, I think is really powerful. So those girls have been where she's been. That's the other reason we need a herd, because they've been somewhere you haven't been. And,
Mm.
and so they understand how you feel.
I've been doing a study on Psalm 91 and I found
Isn't it? Oof.
oh my gosh. Well, I found a old commentary by Charles Spurgeon and I'm struggling through the these and the thous as he's talking, but he made a point that Psalm 91 is calling us to the holy of holies. And his point was that when we become a follower of Christ, we are ushered into the temple, the courts of the temple, and that as believers, we have to take the step to go through the door to the Holy of Holies, but that a lot of times we stay in the outer courts. And he was like, in the outer courts, there's not a roof there and the walls are not stable. And while we're followers of Christ, we are also open to the arrows of the enemy. And he said, but because the veil is torn because of what Jesus did on the cross for us, we can go and sit at the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies, and then we're completely protected from the arrows of the enemy. And as you were talking, I was thinking about that, about going in that prayer closet is like walking into the Holy of Holies, it's like, okay, Lord, I'm protected right here. And I've never thought about how I can easily get caught up in just standing in a corner in the outer court. You know, I'm almost participating from the sidelines more or less. And I just think, especially, I don't want to say the assassination of Charlie Kirk, brought me closer to the Lord, but at the same time, it caused a stirring in me to check myself and realize in a lot of ways I'm lukewarm. And I think about these women as they've gone through prison and they've come to know the Lord, that their faith coming to the deeper house is just like an explosion, is the only way I know how to, in my mind, what they would experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, people will say, well, aren't you doing more for them? I'm like, helping them get a job, helping them get education. And they'll say, well, you put a lot of emphasis on discipleship. You put a lot of emphasis on teaching them how to walk with God. And my answer to that is absolutely I do. Because if they don't have that, what do they have?
Hmm.
And as I always say, yes, that they've got to learn how to walk with God, and they've got to own that on their own so that when they leave here in a year, they can do that when the temptation comes and when the triggers come and when the dysfunction of their family still steps in. Can I maintain? And listen, I have seen so many people, and this is probably may go down a road or a track that y'all don't want to go down, but I've seen so many people who get platformed or get opportunity and they've never developed this character that they need to sustain that. So I want to be a whatever. I want to be a preacher. I want to be this. I want to be that. And they run towards it, right? And they get their following and they get you, but do they have the character that would sustain them? So for me, if I can help them develop a relationship with Jesus that develops Christ-like character in them, then wherever God leads them in their next, they have the characters to sustain it. It's kind of like when you help your child get a job, and then we're like, now you're the one that's got to keep, showing up and doing your job or they're going to fire you. We helped you get the job, but you got to sustain it,
Yeah.
kind of that same way. And so, yeah, I think that, again, going back to that, that Psalm 23 is your shepherd make it so personal, and to develop that. But then you got to be a part of a people who are going to love you and support you as you learn how to walk with God, hear his voice, and follow him. It's just so vital, so important. All the
What
girls, by the way, just pulled in. So if they all come tracking in and try to get on the camera, they're all going
Fine.
in the house. I just heard them, the garage door go up. Okay.
Well, I do have one question for you. I actually joke about this that I'm probably the most socially awkward person there is. I always find like people at work who could be my work mom. And like when we have social events at work, I can go through the food line with them so they can like tell me what the food is because I'm undecided if I want to eat that or not. And I don't know what that is. So I'm just very socially awkward. And so I find myself whether it's a friend, someone I go to church with, someone I work with, or maybe just a stranger, that I get in a conversation with them and find out that their world is falling apart, that the ocean has swept them out to sea. And it is inevitable I generally say something stupid. And so I'm constantly like, what is a go-to? And I don't expect I know it always has to go into your personality, how you say things. But if you could give me some advice on a scripture I could go to, or what do these women look for? What is am I making sense? Like, how can I open the door to be like, hey, I want to be here for you, and not just immediately put them off with those words that just come out of my mouth because I'm just so awkward about it.
I think that's an amazing question. I think we all struggle with that. Um, listen, being in ministry for 30 years, you feel there are times when you feel like I've always got to have the answers.
Mhm.
The truth of the matter is sometimes they don't need an answer right then. You know what I'm saying? When somebody comes to you and shares something, they don't need you to go, well, the Bible says blah, 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 blah. And if you love Jesus, then you should be doing blah, 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 blah. And all that does is dishearten them at the moment. I think what they need
Yeah.
to know is you see them,
Mm.
you understand where you hear them. It's something to know somebody sees you and understands your pain. And as I've said to many of the ladies who will never get out of prison, your prayers are more important than your presence. So people that are far away that are in pain, I got a friend and her husband just passed away. I can't go to the funeral tomorrow night, but I'm praying for her. But if somebody's in front of me, sometimes they just need me to go, you know what? I am so sorry. Or that really stinks, right? What do you need from me right now? Do you want me to pray for you? Do you need a hug? Do you just
Mm.
want me to sit here? I think that's a great, we assume a lot of times because it's what we would like is what somebody else wants. Does that make sense? So if
Yes.
I want to be left, like when I'm sick, I go in a room and close the door and I will come out when I feel better. Okay. Don't come in there and bother me. Just let me be sick. Okay. So for me, if I'm going through something difficult, I want you to hug my neck, tell me you're praying for me, and then let me go be with Jesus, okay, to figure it out. So I might put that on somebody else. That's what they need when that's not at all what they need. So I've kind of learned, honestly, just to, First John is all about God's love. And so how do we love people well? And I've got this thing that I do with the Lord, y'all, where I just go, what is love saying right now? Because God is love. So I'm basically saying, God, what are you saying right now? So what is love saying? If I'm supposed to love your people well, then what is love saying about this person? And then also, and sometimes the Lord will say, give me a scripture, or sometimes the Lord will say, just give them a hug, or just sit there, just be with them. Like sometimes I think that when people go to the altar and get on their knees to pray, people just run up there to pray over them. And I'm like, what if they just need that time, just them and Jesus? And you're almost interrupting it. You know what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah.
to be able to sit back and say, God, what is love saying? What do they need? Right. And then ask them, hey, what do you need from me right now? I need a hug. I just need you to sit here with me. Would you just pray for me? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that does a lot for people. We don't always have to have the answers because he's the answer, but we do need to try to, how do we best come alongside those people? Y'all come on in. Come on in. There they go. I thought y'all would come in here and just wave in the camera. But anyway, they're all coming in from work and I see bags of shopping. So they've had them a good time. I hope y'all bought some more of those hot tamale, whatever things, candies y'all brought me in here. Okay. Probably gained quite some weight eating their little thing, cinnamon whatevers they brought in. Cinnamon discs. Yeah. Do I need one? No, I'm good. You can bring me one. Yeah, look at them. All right. So anyway, I kinda think that I don't know if that answered your question, but that's
It
kinda
did.
where I've been with it. I don't think at sometimes they necessarily need an answer. And we feel that, or I do, like the pressure that I'm going to have this answer. And sometimes, y'all, as true as it is, I will hug somebody and go, oh, God's got this. He's going to work it out. And I mean that. And I believe it with all my heart. But when we say things like that, they feel like it's being dismissive. It's almost like going, hey, I'll pray for you and walking away. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes even in our effort to speak truth, they can feel like it's dismissive. So I think to be able to say, I see you, I hear you, right? I think
Yeah.
is huge. And then, what's love saying, Lord, right here? What do you want me to say? And then asking them, what do you need from me right now? I think are huge, you know.
Well, it's been an eye opener for me because this is sometimes, or I know it's a stereotype that you have your idea of what prison is and what goes on there, and like you said, the type people. But to hear how God is moving in the prison, we don't hear that. That's
Right.
not the message we hear.
Right.
We're constantly told, this is what's going on and it's overcrowding and this is how they're acting. But to hear these ladies are seeking God and he's moving in the prison is a totally different message and enlightening for me on this ministry that you have.
Yeah, and there will be many people, and I won't speak for my girls, but there are many girls who would say, "I'm thankful for prison. I'm thankful that God sat me down so that I could be still and know He's Lord."
Mm,
And listen, they know their Bibles and they love the Lord. And on Tuesday nights, I go in there and they've invited friends. And the Bible says God is a consuming fire. And so I believe there's two kinds of fires. One fire burns all the yuck off that doesn't look like Jesus. The other fire is like this fired up passion, like I want to go tell everybody about Jesus. And that's what I see in these ladies. And so the one that just got out wrote a letter to her judge and she said, I want to thank you for putting me in prison. It was
Wow.
the best thing that ever happened to me because in prison I found Jesus. And so, yeah, you're right. We don't always hear that side of what God is doing within those walls. But it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty humbling because isn't it true that we want to complain about our circumstances and our trials instead of looking at them as it brings us to Christ? Even
yeah.
as believers, it brings us to Christ, but I don't even want to say I am too busy whining about it, to
Yeah.
realize that
Yeah.
God's using this.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to James chapter 1 where it says, you count it all a joy when the trials and the difficulties come because he's working within you. I heard a guy named Graham Cook make this statement, and he said, you have children, and if there was any other way your children could learn something, you would make it easy for them. And so if you are in a circumstance that's difficult, then that means this is the only way I'm going to learn that character, that Christ-like character, transform my heart and my mind is for me. If there was any other way, but this circumstance is here to grow me into his likeness. And I've just always thought through that, when my perspective gets bad and I do whine and complain and I'm a good person. Why are you letting this happen to me? I think we've all done that one, but if there was any other way, he would do it because we would do that for our kids. But he knows that's the best way to get you in a position where you learn and grow and find him. And that's pretty powerful.
Well, we appreciate the time with you today and you telling us about the Deeper House. And we hope that it's opened some people's eyes to the ministry that you have and that they understand now when we say, hey, you're supporting the Deeper House. They know what they're supporting. And I'm so thankful
Yeah.
that you were able to join us today.
Yeah. And I appreciate y'all so much for what you do and y'all taking the time to pray and that you give portions of your finances to help support the Deeper House. It's just been a blessing to us. And yeah, if anybody wants to know more about it, you can go to feedthedeeperhouse.com.
Be sure and shop with us at therecoveringpreacherskids.com, where a portion of all sales goes to further the ministry of the Deeper House.